All right, let's do it then.
Yeah, I think let me just stretch.
Actually, I was going to mention, Fran, I have a...
That's going in.
I need to stretch. Welcome to the Picky Bastard podcast, where a group of people who don't really know what they're talking about pretend that they do, with some very mixed results. This week we're joined by Nick and Fran, our regulars. Hi.
Hello, Matthew.
Hello, Matthew. How are you doing?
I'm very good.
How many times have we started this podcast?
With you.
Well, that's really helpful, Fran. Thanks.
Cheers.
Makes my editing job so easy.
It's all good.
We're also joined by a very special guest. We have Tom Burrows here.
Hello.
Hi, Tom. And so Tom is one of our contributors on the pickybees.com website. I think you're one of my favourites.
Well,
which
thank you very much.
What about me?
I'm gonna tell.
What about Fran?
You mean favourites of the other writers, right? Not you including the editors.
I'd say my favourite on this call right now.
Oh, wow. Okay, he went there.
You two just
Well, you pushed me.
get a room.
He also has the dubious honour of being a return guest, because last time we recorded, the equipment was haunted, and so it all disappeared.
Yeah, lost episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You will never know what we think of Africa Express's album.
Yeah, well, it adds more mythos to it, I think.
Nice.
And to
Nice
you, Tom.
vocab.
I slagged off Damon Albarn on that episode, and it's never going to be heard by the world.
Oh, dear.
And so we have to get to know Tom, and so we're going to ask some questions, and these are the usual questions that we ask. So Tom, what is your first album that you ever bought?
Okay. I remember this one quite vividly. It was Big Hits 99.
Very nice.
Had Lou Bega's Mambo No. 5 on it.
Nice.
Livin' La Vida Loca by Ricky Martin. Summertime by Another Level. All the classics.
I don't
So
know.
you
Another Level.
I don't know Another Level, actually.
Another Level. They were the
Pass
same
me
ones
by.
with that Let Me Lick You Up and Down song.
It's called Freak Me. That song's called Freak
Yeah.
Me, yeah. That wasn't on there, unfortunately.
Do you not remember that song?
No, I don't. Look, my
Really?
face expression now is not on the mic, unfortunately, but I'm pretty horrified by what's
Let me
spoken.
lick you up and down until you say stop.
Absolute tune.
Yeah?
Can I just say
Yeah,
stop
we
right
should
now
pause.
before we begin?
We should pause the podcast, all go and listen to it, and then come back.
Right, everyone go away, do
Got
that.
it in my head
Come back.
now. I'm just dancing along.
Okay, so the next question, Tom, is what was the best album from last year?
So, do you mean the last year, or do you mean last year?
He means the last year.
Okay.
Trying to stepping in and telling him what it means.
So,
Whichever way you want.
yeah, so we're, October now, so
Yeah.
nearly the...
Go back to
all of
October last year, yes,
Yeah.
that's permitted. Extremely strict rules
Not
here.
September.
I'm just going to pick one from this year, and I'll go with Wise Blood's album, Titanic Rising. Came out in about April, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's a really well constructed album. It's 10 tracks. They're all... I just think the songcraft and the songwriting is really good on that, but I would say that I still have a lot to catch up from this year. So
Yeah, it's been a mental year, hasn't it, really?
Yeah,
all in all.
it's
Yeah.
so much
unbelievable.
It's just non-stop.
yeah,
Yeah.
so there might be more to... There might be a different favourite come the end of the year.
Yeah. Have you guys checked out Where's Blood?
I haven't at all.
I haven't either.
No,
I
neither
keep
have I.
meaning to, but
We're rubbish, basically.
yeah, I haven't as yet.
We know nothing
It's
about
been
that.
a mental
down.
year for music, so I haven't got time for Wise Blood. But I will.
You won't
I'll give him a
regret it.
go. I'll give him a go.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Cool.
Yeah, you have to make time. Okay, so what was
You make
your
time.
best... maybe I will. So what was the best show you went to last year?
In the last year.
In the last year?
Okay. If I'm thinking in the last year, I think this was in the last year, but I went to see Moses Sumney at the Dance House in Manchester.
Oh, fantastic. We should have seen that.
That was a great venue.
Did he sing someone else's songs?
No, he actually sang his own songs.
What a shame.
I've put down here, what a voice, what a songwriter, what a man. So
What a man.
that's all I've got to
I like that.
say, right?
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think he's fantastic. So yeah.
He's got a great
I'd love to see
voice. Just, yeah.
Was
Lot
that
of
a big venue? I've never been
No,
there.
it's not at all. Is it?
It's not. It's like an old sort of theatre, so it was all seated.
Where was it, did you say?
At the Dance House.
Okay, oh cool, yeah, it's a nice little venue.
Yeah.
I've never been in it, but I know it's not too big.
Yeah, it really suited his music. So yeah, really Really like that one.
That's awesome.
I saw a Shaun of the Dead musical in there.
Wow.
What?
I would have gone with Moses
audience-
Insomnia if I'd had those two choices to
Audience
make.
participation,
I love Shaun of the Dead. It's a great film.
where we had to hit zombies with a like inflatable baseball bat.
Wow.
Wow. That actually, maybe you're selling on it now. Maybe I might have gone with Moses Insomnia. I don't know.
Yeah.
That sounds quite good.
It wasn't.
It wasn't.
No. Okay. So, what was the worst show you've ever been to?
Okay. I can't really think of an actual gig that I've paid to, which I thought was particularly worthy of this. It's not an honour, the opposite of that.
Disrespect.
It's disrespectful title, but one of my first gigs that I went to was a local Hull radio station's all-star pop concert, which starred Westlife, Girls Aloud, and Mark Owen. Not the rest of Take That, just Mark Owen.
Mark Owen.
At Hull City's KCOM Stadium. And it's just like an all-star ensemble, terrible pop concert. And I think.
Yeah.
You know, my memory's pretty hazy from it because it's many years ago now, but I think it must have been pretty bad with that lineup.
Did he sing the classic Clementine?
I don't know. He did.
No.
I
Probably.
don't even know what that is.
Mark Owen's debut single.
Oh yeah?
It was a stormer.
He has solo stuff? I was going to ask, what did he sing? Was it just Take That?
Just
Or
the
was
bits,
it-
just his bits of the Take That songs.
Just the,
It's just silence in between.
just the
Cardboard cut out of Gary Barlow.
Oh, that's
All
great.
right. So,
And I was going to go rogue and ask a bonus question. As we're focusing on the album of the decade at Picky Bastards, I was wondering what your pick for album of the decade was.
Yeah, so my pick for album of the decade, I think it's the same as Nick's actually.
it is, yeah.
It was to Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar. And
Not bad.
yeah, obviously.
Not bad.
Thank
People
you.
do.
It's an okay album.
Yeah, and obviously there's a piece on the Picky Bastards website which I'll plug
Yeah, plug it.
Yeah.
right now.
PickyBS.com.
Yeah.
Where 15 of us choose our album of the decade.
Yes.
Yeah. Everyone should check it out.
Yeah, so I wrote a bit on there about the album and why I think it's a monumental piece of work, both musically, lyrically, and also politically. But I'll just refer you to the website because I don't think I'm eloquent enough to
PickyPeas.com.
words right now.
Wow.
So yeah.
I don't think you'll get much disagreement here about that.
Yep. I voted the same way, so yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not even his best album of the decade.
Ooh. I don't know.
Fair enough. We'll save that for next time.
Yes.
Cool. So we're here to talk about 6 albums. Well, 5 albums and a playlist. And so they are One True Pairing, self-titled album. JPEGMAFIA's All My Heroes Are Cornballs. Microwave with Death Is a Warm Blanket. Burna Boy with African Giant. Silver Jews with American Water. And St Vincent. And Tom made us a nice playlist for that. And so to get
Nick's just looking at me. Right.
Daggers right now. Yeah. We'll get there. We'll get to that. Don't worry.
Nick has history.
Yeah.
Wow. So we're going to get us cracking with asking Tom another question, and I'm going to ask him what album fluctuated most depending on your mood.
Yeah, so I thought this was. I enjoyed this question. I did actually change my opinion on it during the month of listening to these albums, but I'm going to jump straight into the classic on this one. Silver Jews, American Water, which I chose this based on David Berman's Purple Mountains album from earlier this year, and obviously he is sad passing away earlier this year as well. And his kind of I'd describe it as like a Lou Reed-esque deadpan spoken word delivery. I expected to love this record because that kind of thing kind of really appeals to me. And in the end, I liked it rather than being totally won over by it. So I think his delivery, his style of delivery, really highlights some of his best lyrics. And I think he is a poet and a writer as well as a musician. So the album opens with this really striking couplet. It says, "In 1984, I was hospitalised for approaching perfection, slowly screwing my way across Europe, I had to make a correction. And that sounds like the
It
opening
is a
to
dynamite phrase, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so good.
yeah, it sounds like the opening to a novel rather than a song, and it shouldn't really work in music because it's so wordy, but I think he carries it off quite well. And I think the best tracks on this create an environment that help his words carry a certain like weight to them. So the songs like Random Rules, the opener, People, Buckingham Rabbit, and the closer, The Wild Kindness, they all have these really lovely melodies which allow his kind of tales of American life to shine on top of them. Pavement's Stephen Malkmus is in the band as well.
Oh, really?
He's got supporting vocals.
He was for a while anyway, not all the way through. But
Yeah,
at this
didn't know
point
that.
he was, yeah.
But yeah, on lots of these tracks he kind of does backing vocals on it, and I think his little flourishes, whether they are backing vocals or the extra guitar he adds to the songs, I think they add to the sort of atmosphere of the album. But the reason it fluctuated depending on my mood was that I feel that any musician whose music kind of lives on the cusp of poetry and music, like the intersection between the two, when the music isn't quite right, I find the wordiness a little bit tiresome sometimes. So to pick an artist, for example, just because I wrote a review of their album earlier this year, I find Kate Tempest's music a little bit like that. Like sometimes, yeah, when she nails it, it's really good, but when it's not as captivating, I kind of find it a bit tiresome sometimes. So sometimes on this record, when songs like We Are Real and Honk If You're Lonely, I found them a bit less charismatic and more annoying generally, like lyrically. So sometimes I feel like it's trying to be too clever for its own good, and he seems to be like reveling in the words rather than the music when it should be kind of an even balance.
Yeah.
So I would say that when this album's good, it's really good, and I can see why certain outlets are giving it such critical acclaim. And I think I will return to this album, but at the moment it hasn't completely clicked with me, and it kind of made me want to listen to a Pavement album instead, because I think they do have a kind of similar sound.
And are you a big Pavement fan, can I ask?
I really like the album Crooked Rain.
Yeah.
Snipped it on the podcast as one.
I did,
Oh, really?
I love it at one point.
I haven't completed my listen to the back catalogue.
Come on.
Well, we
Pick up
should
the
stop
pace.
now.
Yeah.
Stop recording. Go and listen to the podcast.
It's another level, and all
Yeah.
the past episodes of the podcast. But yeah, that's my opinion on Silver Jews. I think I can see why it's good. I really like some of it, but some of it's still yet to completely click with me.
Okay. Shall I jump
Cool.
in?
So yeah, go
Yeah,
on, Fran.
cool.
Jump in.
So lyrically, I think it's a really stunning album. I think I've picked out the same line that Tom did. I think any album that opens with the line in 1984 I was hospitalised for approaching perfection is going to be, you could just tell straight away it's going to be a fascinating sort of lyrical album. And I think it continues that way throughout. I think there's so much dry humour and cynicism in the words. And as a massive cynic myself, that was definitely appealing to me. There's like so many great examples of lyrics throughout it, but there's a couple that I really enjoyed that I wanted to pick out, where in Blue Arrangements there's the line, I love your amethyst eyes and your Protestant thighs, which I was a pretty big fan of. And I just love the chorus of Buckingham Rabbit, which is, and then the rent became whiskey and my life became risky.
Yeah, I like
I
that.
love it. And I love that song in general. That and Random Rules, the opener, are my two favourites.
Yeah.
You've mentioned Pavement. I wanted to mention The National, which I rarely do. But there's a real sort of early The National sound to the music and the lyrics, I think. Like the first couple of albums before The National sort of became a bit bolder in their sound, I think this band must have influenced The National. I mean, their first album came out just a couple of years after this album, and there's a lot. You know, his voice reminded me of him, his lyrics reminded me of him, and it's a sound that The National moved on from, but there's a lot of similarity between this album and their first two albums. So, in a weird way, it did sometimes make me want to go and listen to those National albums more than it made me want to listen to this album. But I do really like it, and I do want to go back and listen to more. For me, of all the classic albums we've done, this was up there with the best classic albums we've done, I would say. I've not loved a lot of the classics, so that's maybe not saying loads, but there's this and Biggie are the ones that really stand out for me that we've done as classics. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Silver Juice.
I'll jump in then.
Yeah, go on, Nick.
So yeah, I mean, I'm echoing what the other two have said a great deal. Actually, I think lyrically, it's an amazing juxtaposition of being darkly hilarious and then suddenly extremely poignant. And I think it's obviously I didn't know him, but it reflects a personality that's really a fascinating kind of individual to sort of study, almost to sort of see what his thought process is. And I think he seems to be speaking in a tongue-in-cheek way, but then other times in a very open and honest way, which I think is really riveting, honestly, is best word I can use to describe it. I'm, as has been clear to anyone who's listening for a while, a massive Pavement fan, and Steve Malcolm's involvement with this, is just lifts it up to another level. I think there are songs where Malcolm actually kind of leads on it a bit more. I can't think of the actual track names now, but there are a couple of ones where he's running the show a bit more, and I found those to be really engaging as well. I think lyrically, actually, although I would have picked out lots of the same things, I think there's a line at the end of Across the Wild Kindness, the last track, which I noted down, which I think is, I'm going to shine out in the wild silence, which is it's just an amazingly poetic line, just to me typified exactly how well he can write. If I have a caveat to all that, I suppose it's not actually this issue that Tom raised so much as his actual the pitch of his voice is something that's quite idiosyncratic and a bit of an acquired taste. And there are times when I found it a bit distracting, distractingly nasal, I suppose. But it wasn't really off-putting. It's just sometimes I felt like I was thinking, it's, or when Steve Malcolm came in, I really noticed that juxtaposition quite sharply, with their two voices. But I mean, it's a very minor thing. Ultimately, I thought it was really a great album. And without being melodramatic about it, I think he sorely missed, really. It's quite a talent, and he was doing great stuff. And I had heard some of the newest stuff before he passed, and that also was very consistently high quality as well. I thought it was, just quite a talent. So yeah, that's me on that one.
Kind of makes you sad that I didn't know him then, because I can imagine as a live act, he was probably quite fascinating as well. So
there's a couple of YouTube things I've seen. I never saw him live myself, but. Some which really show his idiosyncrasy again, because when he came out, and it was one of his last shows, I think, that was on YouTube, and he came out and just did a story, an anecdote, but it lasted for like 15 minutes. People at the band were just like standing like right, should we get going? It's just really like, it was his show, it was really his show. It was like good music, but it was fundamentally his band.
When we saw
in charge
Big Thief and Adrian Lenker just talked for 45 minutes.
It's really eccentric with some of the stuff she was bringing up. It was really fascinating, and bizarre. So that's me. What do you think, Matt?
I can pretty much echo a lot of what you guys have said.
That's not allowed, unfortunately. We can't have all four of us in agreement, so you're going to have to say you hated it completely. I'm
a bit more negative though.
Oh.
I would say that like the lyrics and everything, fantastic, really, really interesting. I wrote down the same opening line. I already kind of knew that song, but still the way it begins, the album, I hadn't heard it in its context, and I was just like, this is kind of ridiculous way to start a long piece of music. And to draw a comparison to a different artist, I think I can see a lot of influence in Willie Mason, who I've brought up as someone I love. In his deadpan style of delivery and some of his more kind of ironic lines that he puts forward, and that also timeline would make sense as well. And so I liked a lot of it, but I do think it was generally quite uneven, and like you say, when it doesn't quite work, because of his tone and because of the way it's kind of almost flippant, the way he delivers everything, it just kind of over the course of the album wore me down. And so if the music wasn't there, and it wasn't like, if the music wasn't there on a particular song, it would make it just so much harder to engage with.
You say it wore you down over time. So are you saying then that the last songs, because to me that last song I referred to, the Wild Kindness, I think is the last song, is possibly the best song on the album. So do you mean in that respect it wound down for you over time?
Over time throughout the album, but also with each listen, but also the more I listen to it. Like,
Okay.
I liked Wild Kindness. I really like the interplay with the keyboards and the guitar in that. But like, that's mostly focused on the intro, and that dynamism of the song kind of dissipates as the song progresses as well. Plus, the biggest problem I have with this album is, you guys know I hate fades, and the second song, like, I've written a piece about this. The second song fades in and fades out.
Right.
It's just awful.
We were talking about this yesterday, actually, Fran and I, and I don't agree with you, I have to say. I'm going to take this up with you, take issue with this later on, but when your review comes out of that issue. But I can't agree with you. I think fades have their place, but yeah. Anyway, that's another story.
But yeah, but broadly, I'm not going to go back to this, but I enjoyed it. Like, I like the fact I listened to this album.
Okay.
Something
Cool.
that I feel like I gained a little bit from.
Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Cool.
What's next? Me, I
So
think.
next we're going to you, Nick. Which album had the most purpose?
I would definitely say JPEGMAFIA's All My Heroes Are Cornballs.
Okay.
I would go with this had the most purpose. The album has is very, very intentional sort of mass of glitch. Like, it's just an unbelievable. Well, this sounds really pejorative, but it's an unbelievable mess, really, the album, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way, actually, but it really tries to dismantle any kind of notion of analog songwriting, really, real, in inverted commas, songwriting, and becomes entirely in a digital space. So I found that really intriguing. It makes for really, really complicated song construction, which I find really fascinating. There's a lot to dig into. You could kind of pour through parts of it over and over again, and you'd be hearing new things. It's also it's actually a hilarious album in many ways, I think, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it as well. Some of the titles of the songs even, there was one that's called Post-Verified Lifestyle, which I thought was an absolutely genius way to sort of suggest he's made it because he's post-verified. And there's one, isn't there, called JPEGMAFIA Type Beat, which I also thought was an amazing title. So that sarcasm goes through it all, and he's doing something in the sort of vein of Death Grips. I know there's a lot of comparisons made with him and Death Grips. I think he has his own place in that space, and it's not like he's just ripping off Death Grips. Death Grips is, in many ways, a more acoustic band than this is. This is a digital playground completely, So I thought that was really, really interesting. There were points that I would say that it felt like that it crossed over from being a beautifully messy exercise in construction into just throwing ideas at the wall. There were moments where I just felt like he was just going, throwing anything that came to mind at the wall. I think there's one called Throt Tactics, which I thought was an example of that, where it just felt like you didn't really spend the time to have that intent that I would have liked to have seen all the way consistently through the album. But overall, I really enjoyed it. It was a recommendation from my brother, actually, to me, so I thank him for that. Lewis, who was on the podcast a few months ago, he absolutely loves it. So he persuaded me to get into that, and I think it was a great thing that I did. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
What about, who wants to go? Tom?
Yeah,
Tom.
Well, that's a nice segue there, because I need to give a shout out to my brother as well. Shout out to Joe Burrows in this podcast.
I don't have a brother.
Aww, how sad.
Yeah, my brother introduced me to JPEGMAFIA last year with his album Veteran, which came out last year, which I think, what did you describe it as, Nick? A
Digital playground.
Yeah, mess, yeah.
Yeah. I'd put it's a gloriously chaotic collage of abrasive sound and confrontational lyricism. Basically a mess.
Down in 4 letters, basically. MESS. Yeah.
And Veteran was very replayable once your ears became attuned to it, because it's the same kind of construction. It's just ideas just everywhere. And I've just got to say the same about this record. I think I pretty much agree with what Nick's just said. I think it's really good. I think just on an innovation level, it sounds like very few other hip-hop artists working today, and I think that's why he's caused such a splash over the last year.
Yeah.
Because I think you can make like unconventional beats, but making it listenable and enjoyable and structuring it is the difficult bit. And I think he's good at organising the chaos that he creates. So he includes like a snippet of his friend ordering fast food at a drive-through, or just a random like manic guitar solo, or like he just breaks into auto-tune singing. And rather than it being jarring to me anyway, it added to the whole. I think lyrically, like a caveat that some people might have would be that lyrically it's hard to follow, but I kind of think that's the point. Like it's more impressionistic than narrative. So he does generally just seem to be just addressing haters for most of the album, but I think you get the general impression about what he stands for and what the kind of message he wants to put across. So I think it's quite clear that he has a kind of no bullshit view of the world. Like he hates racism and the alt-right. He hates the way people act on the internet. So that post-verified lifestyle and JPEGMAFIA type beat, those kind of titles just instantly give you the impression of what he's trying to put across. So I like the fact he doesn't spoon-feed the audience, and I think I've also put the clear sense of wit and comedy that runs through the whole album. I just think it's great. Like it's chaos, it's a mess, but I really enjoyed it.
Okay, why don't we go to Matt this time? Shall we?
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in. I also really enjoyed this album, but
again we're having a problem here. Everyone's agreeing. It's just really out of order.
Picky.
Yeah, exactly. We're not that picky today. Go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I see your comparison to Death Grips, but I felt like it was the only comparison was because it was an abrasive hip hop album, but a lot of the parallels weren't as clear, I don't think. I think the way he delivers the music instead had me more comparing him to Childish Gambino. The way his delivery works and the way he kind of uses emotion and almost changes the way to, so he's like almost screaming at times. It is more reminiscent of some of like Donald Glover's early albums, I think, which I really enjoyed. And I found, I think the issue I had was because it's so kind of fragmented and it's kind of long, but not long. It felt long because there were so many tracks. I found that the kind of fragmented nature of the whole experience just made it harder to pay attention to this kind of mixed production that he was doing. Like the songs themselves were kind of all over the place, in a very intentional and interesting way. But because the songs themselves were also so short and all over the place, it made it exhausting. But I still enjoyed it, but it was just made it more hard work than say like an easy listening, or something that really grabs you and just is really straightforward. So I don't know if that's a negative. I just mean it was hard work as an album.
Okay.
I also just really enjoyed his references, the way he mixed like these nerd culture stuff with his very hard political views, which is a kind of interesting and fun juxtaposition. I think we're talking about Batman and the alt-right at the same time, which is cool.
Absolutely. All right, Fran, you're up.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first 3 or 4 songs really sum up with my issue with this album. It's incredibly ploddy. His flow is really lackluster, his beats are really thin, and he keeps trying to sing and he can't sing, so he should stop singing. And I also find, despite a few clever one-liners, like the one about Brexit, that his lyrics are pretty bullshitty. It feels as if he's just picked them out of a book of rhymes, and it just doesn't grab me lyrically at all. Grimy Waifu is a particular example of this. It's just weak. What is he talking about? And interestingly, Nick's picked this as the one that had the most purpose. I have written one bullet point that just says there is no purpose to this album. It's got no purpose.
That's the point. Right back at you.
It also feels really, really difficult to distinguish between the songs because the beats are all so similar. They're all so tinny. It's just a nothing album to me.
So it's consistent.
Nothing.
Yes, consistently shit. Yes, it is consistently shit. It's just a nothing album. There's nothing on it at all for me, apart from the line about Brexit, and that's just because I thought it was quite good that even a shit rapper like this is talking about Brexit. Everybody is talking about Brexit. So yeah, I just didn't. It did absolutely nothing for me. I'm really surprised to hear you all liked it as much as you did, especially you, Nick, because the beats are so thin, so tinny, and that's the kind of thing you usually have a problem with. Like,
but it was again an intent to make something very digital, very clipped, and.
But whenever anyone makes
up
an album like that, it's an intent, right? When we did the Princess Nokia album,
it could
and you
be.
just went on about how tinny that was also an intent. For
This had a sort of tongue-in-cheek character to it though that was really like taking the piss out of itself. I thought in lots of ways, which I liked.
What a fucking stupid thing to do with an album. Just gonna write some songs to take the piss out of my own music. It's fucking terrible.
I'm kind of glad that someone hated it because it kind of seems like it's that kind of divisive character who some people love and some people absolutely hate.
I'm disappointed. I really want because like I've heard quite a bit about him. That I was reasonably excited, but as soon as the first song started, I was like, nah, this is not going to work for me. So yeah.
Open-minded as usual.
Yes, absolutely.
Very open-minded.
Absolutely.
A bit of a shy.
You ready for your question, Fran?
I am. Yes.
What album had you looking up lyrics?
I can't answer it.
You
Because I had two choices for it. I had Silver Jews,
Yeah.
which was totally lyrically beautiful, and I adored, so I was really into the lyrics there. And then I had, as a backup, if someone chose Silver Jews, I was going to go with JPEGMAFIA and say that I had to look up the lyrics because I couldn't tell what the fuck he was saying half the time. So that is my two albums that I had anything to say about lyrics, so you're going to have to make a new question up for me.
So you can't just answer anything on the fly then, that seems like, flexible.
What
Roll
was
with the
most
punches.
lyrically
I don't have anything.
uninteresting?
What was the most lyrically
What's the
uninteresting of
opposite?
the remaining
What's
ones?
most uninteresting?
Ooh, okay, what's left?
We got One True Pairing, Microwave,
One True Pairing.
Okay,
and African Giant, Burna Boy.
so Burna Boy, African Giant, I will go for one that's less lyrically interesting. I think I kind of got more out of this album than I expected to, because I didn't really think I would like Burna Boy from what I've heard about him, and I've heard stuff about his sort of homophobic lyrics in the past and stuff like that, so I wasn't terribly excited to listen to him. But musically, I quite enjoyed it. I think it was quite well produced. It was quite slick, but in a good way. I don't really like the word slick, but I think it applies. And it had a lot of energy, and I could kind of just coast by listening to just the music and be quite happy with it as an album. But lyrically, I found it less enjoyable. I think songs like Secret and Gun Body show some pretty questionable attitudes towards women, and across the board there's just a lot of talk about guns, and I don't really need to hear someone talking about Berettas on every other song. It's not really for me. I think the song Different with Ziggy Marley, no, not Ziggy Marley, Damian Marley, stood out to me as a bit different to the rest of the album. I think they did better in that respect, and it was the standout song.
That's with Angelique Kidjo as well.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, and there was a couple of songs. I mean, I was disappointed because I really like Georgia Smith, and that was one of the songs that I found a bit questionable in its lyrics. And yeah, the other thing about this album really is that it is very, 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 very long. It seems to go on forever, and I don't think there was many times when in one listen I got to the end. I think I had to sort of take a break and listen to someone who wasn't talking about Berettas. So yeah, I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, because I quite enjoyed the music, but lyrically questionable for me. How about you, Matt?
I also have mixed feelings about this. I liked some of the songs. I think the track you picked out with Damian Marley and Angelique Kidjo was definitely the best song.
Yeah.
And I think I am biased because I actually like Angelique Kidjo quite a lot.
I mean, you like saying the name, don't you?
I've said it 3 times. You didn't know who it was, so I thought I'd better make sure it sticks.
Who was it
in your
again?
head.
Who was it? One more time?
I've forgotten.
Anyway, carry on.
But yeah, she had a really interesting album last year or 2 years ago, and so I was excited to see her, and I think her voice is great. And it was a bit more different, the song, because I found
the song Different.
I found like a lot of this album to be quite samey. it was a lot of the similar kind of beats used throughout, and it's not too dissimilar to a lot of similar R&B style music, especially with the way that he modulates his voice as well. It just becomes all a bit uniform. But that said, like it wasn't unenjoyable. It had at points it had an interesting mixture of sounds, like extra instruments on top of those beats, which made the songs a bit more interesting. But I still like. At the end of the day, my favourite song that he's done is the collaboration with Dave, and not his own music. So it seems like he's maybe a better feature than, for me at least.
Yeah, because for me the song different as well. I enjoyed Damian Marley's contribution, and you enjoyed that person whose name you've said 17 times.
Yeah.
So
who you still can't remember.
Angelique Kitcho.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
You made it.
Wow. Quite impressed with myself.
All right.
Cool.
So
What
I think
do you reckon,
Tom
Nick?
seems. No,
Oh,
I think
Tom.
Tom seems to want to speak.
Tom's ready.
Go for it.
I was about to be outraged by the answer to that question of the least. What was it? The least inspiring lyrics.
Yeah.
Until you mentioned the points about homophobia and misogyny, which I hadn't heard about before.
Yeah.
Now you feel like you can't say that.
I love homophobia.
So now my outrage has been tempered a little bit. But I mean, if I was answering that question, I'd say that this would be the album which I'd look up the lyrics the most because.
Okay. Because you can tell what you're saying.
Well, sometimes because some of it is in like Igbo, one of the tribal languages of Nigeria. But after the JPEGMAFIA, now I have to give a shout out to my other sibling, my sister, Hannah Burrows. Shout out on this podcast because
Nice.
Have you got any other family members?
Anyone else just get them all off the list right now?
Hi, Mum. Yeah, no, my sister's a big fan of the Afrobeats music genre. And I'd previously never had the desire to explore it any further because it never really appealed to me. This Burna Boy record had intrigued me. I think, Fran, you said as well that it had some like critical acclaim. So, it intrigued me for that reason. And also, this kind of sound is getting adopted by other like mainstream artists. So, Drake, for instance, his More Life mixtape a couple of years ago had so much of this kind of Afrofusion type music on it. So I was intrigued to hear it. But I have to say, in comparison to the two comments so far, I really enjoyed this record. I mean, I found it really catchy. The way it kind of blends that contemporary American R&B with the more like African and dancehall inflected music. But the biggest thing I enjoyed about it was how political it is. So obviously it's called African Giant, which I kind of just assumed because he's from Nigeria, that's why it was called that. But I think it's actually really sharp in its references to like contemporary Africa and Nigeria. So, I mean, a lot of this I got from doing research. So. Because some of it isn't in English.
What's research? What are you chatting about?
Yeah, well, I just while I was reading it, I like the song "Wetting Mango Do." I have no idea what that means, but apparently it's about the hardship of making ends meet in Nigeria, and it's contrasted with the next song, which is called Dangote, which is the name of the richest man in Africa. So it kind of contrasts the lifestyles of the poor and the rich, like back to back. And I personally am a big fan of pop artists doing this. So I think that when there's like a loud guitar band, for example, who are like politically active and stand for something, that's always highlighted. But I think when pop artists do it, it's not as commonly recognised. And I think that's somehow even more admirable in a way because they're spreading a message to an audience who aren't necessarily aware of these things. They just want to dance, kind of thing. So I think the political aspect of it was something that I really liked. I've put the drawback on it, which I think you've both mentioned so far, is that it's pretty long. It's over an hour long.
Yeah.
And
Is it actually over an hour long?
Yeah, I think it's like 65 minutes long or something. So yeah, the songs can get a little bit samey after a while, and that dulls the impact. So though I like the political aspect, in the second half, some of the songs just start to blend into each other. But I do absolutely love some of the spoken samples on the record. So there's a song called Another Story, which starts with a segment about colonialism and how the British went into Nigeria.
I'd agree with that, definitely. Yeah, that was one of the most interesting parts on the album.
Yeah. And the album ends with a quote from his mum, collecting an award on his behalf. So he won like Best International Act at an award ceremony, and he didn't turn up because he thought it was a bit of a slight on him, relegating him to the international category rather than just saying the best act kind of thing. And she says, the message from Burna, I believe, would be that every black person should please remember you were Africans before you became anything else, and that just ends the record. And I think that's just a great way to sum up like the message of the record. So I've put it's a big thumbs up for me, but it's slightly tempered by the.
I mean, I've got to say about the homophobia thing is I've not heard anything myself. I feel like I've read in the past that there was some homophobia in some of his earlier stuff. I think so. It's not something I heard on this album. So I did hear some of the misogyny on the album. It's not terrible, but there are bits about slapping someone's arse and choking them, which I struggled with a little bit. But
you don't hear that.
I think you've made some good points there, though. I think like there is some interesting political stuff on there. I think maybe why that struggle was a struggle for me sometimes to get to was because it was a lot of stuff to get to get through to hear that sometimes. There's a hell of a lot of songs. And it kind of got a bit samey, and I didn't always notice that as much as maybe I would have liked to. So
and admittedly, some of it's not in English, so you can't be.
So I didn't know that.
But that's
okay.
That was fun.
Nick,
it's me then. Yeah. So my comments aren't really related to the other three people's comments, I guess, because they're more about the type of music and the sound of the music itself. And about the political aspects, which I as usual, haven't done any research, so I barely follow any of the actual context. But I respect what Tom's saying there about some of the political implications and stuff, and sort of things that he's striking in sort of his commentary. For me, though, the genre is very polished, in a way that I find a little bit hard to get past. It's very has a sheen over it that I find a bit difficult to listen to sometimes, and one of the ways in which that particularly manifests itself, which won't be a surprise to anyone, is in all the vocoding of the lyrics, or the auto-tune, and kind of passing it through hundreds of filters and stuff to get to the final product. It's very off-putting to me, and very distracting. And whenever I hear it, I find it I have to fight so hard not to switch off completely. So while I thought it was... the other thing I'd say as well is the genre as well, as far as I'm not an expert on this, but the genre from this album's context is very upbeat. Like, I don't mean it's politically upbeat, but it's the actual pacing of the album is quite up-tempo a lot of the time. And I find that something I'm not that enthused about, really. It's just not something I was that...
Don't like tempo, do you?
I don't like tempo. No, I like slow, laborious, and also I'll say that this is one of the challenges this album had, was that I've been listening to the new Nick Cave album a lot at the moment, which is about as far away from this as you can get in terms of tempo. So anyway, so no, I don't have tons to say except that I find it really difficult to gain access to what I can see from various other comments that come through are interesting about it. But it wasn't really for me, to be honest with you.
Fair enough.
That's it.
Fair enough. All right. Well, I'm going to jump in now because I want to talk about Microwave.
Okay. You picked it, didn't you, in the first place?
Death is a warm blanket.
I picked it.
Yeah.
Death is a warm blanket. And I picked it because I got a recommendation, and I wanted to pick something that was a bit more of like post-hardcore vibes. I wanted to get something that was a bit of a harder edge to see what you guys thought of it.
Did you feel you got that?
For me, we'll see what you guys think. But for me, I really, really enjoyed this album. I thought it was fantastic. It was more grungy than I was expecting. It was very much like a 90s throwback almost at times. Like the title track, DIWB, it felt like it could be Nirvana at some points, or Foos, early Foos.
My eyes have just gone really
something
wide.
with something with
on the
Dave
mic,
Grohl
my
in.
face is just
Nick's
like,
face just went insane.
my eyes have just gone really,
Yeah.
really wide in shock at you saying that. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah, just in parts. Apart from the obvious, like when they go full scream. But I think the whole album is just very big. It's very emotional. It feels raw. Like it's angry, and it feels like they're in a really bad place. But they convey the kind of like the range of that emotion. I think through every aspect of the music, but like lyrically and musically, and the way he delivers the vocals. But it does feel like they're ready to give up, and I want to just give him a bit of a hug or something, just a pep talk or anything.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's just for someone in this genre, I think the part that is hardest is flicking between something where it's super heavy. You have like big vocals and the kind of powerhouse drums and stuff like that, and then you have to flick to something that's a bit more quieter on just on a dime. You have to do that switch, because that is I think a key part of the genre. I think they did it fairly well. But yeah, so I'm curious to see what you guys think. We'll go to Nick, 'cause
Okay.
his face.
We'll go to Nick's
Face.
face.
My review is just my facial expression. Yeah, I'm not going to say anything at all. So when I heard, well, first of all, I hated the band name very, very much. I just thought that put me off immediately. But
It's a great name.
Microwave.
Yeah.
Come on. Anyway, so I
Oven.
when I got into the album a little bit, and when I heard the genre
Toaster.
was kind of like this. Yeah, I see the Foos reference more than the Nirvana reference, and I say that.
Yeah.
I don't say that complimentary way, because I've never really liked the Foo Fighters myself. I've always thought they were a very weak version of Nirvana, really, a very sort of plastic pop version of Banana. Banana, yeah. My favourite band, Banana. So
Did you
yeah,
not like
so
the colour and the
I think
shape?
no. So anyway, that's a whole other story. So yeah, this album though, ultimately I actually didn't. I thought I'm going to really get pissed off with this album. It's going to really put me off. But I actually didn't dislike it nearly as much as I thought I would. In the end, I thought there were some things in it that I quite liked. It had some hooks that were quite interesting. Some kind of like a little bit of dynamics that was quite cool. And when it went for it, when it sort of turned it up to 11. Although it was very, very rock, which I'm not that fussed about rock, mainstream rock as it were, but I thought it did it pretty well. I thought it produced it pretty well. So it did get a little bit thin, I felt like, content-wise over the course of the album. So by the end, it tailed off for me a little bit.
For sure, it definitely.
I just felt like they'd made their point in terms of the general tenor of their angst. They'd made the point, after 20 minutes rather than 40 minutes kind of thing. I didn't need to keep going with that. So yeah, but no, in the end, I thought it was all right. I thought, I didn't. There have been albums we've done a little bit like this. Can't think of the names now. We've done a couple of albums of this kind of genre that I've really had a problem with. But this was the best of those by some distance. Yeah. So, but I think comparing to Nirvana is just lunacy, basically. So we just put that out there. All right.
One part of one song.
Like one bar. One beat.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. So who wants to go? Fran?
Shall I go? Okay.
Yeah.
So weirdly, I want to compare this to Burna Boy.
Nice.
Go for it.
I feel like
So similar to genre.
the only reason I'm comparing it is I had much the same sort of feelings in that I really went into it expecting very little, and kind of enjoyed it more than I thought I would. With some caveats, but I think I'd liked it more than the Burna Boy. I think it grew on me as well, and I think what I liked was there's a sort of Eels-like sound to a few of the songs. Float to the Top particularly.
That's a good association, Eels. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
And it kind of, not when they go full throttle, but the quieter bits of the songs. They did remind me of Eels quite a lot, and I'm a big fan of theirs. So, and I like, you sort of touched on it a bit, Matt, but I like the sort of light and shade in a lot of the songs, sort of the quiet contemplative moments before sort of big bursts of sound. And I think it managed, and again, Nick's just mentioned a couple of he's tried to mention a couple of the albums, but can't remember what any of them are, but similarly, I think it avoids some of the problems I've had with other albums, like Pup and Swaying that we've done before.
Swaying, yeah, that's the one.
I think it manages to avoid the juvenile quality that I talked about with Pup, where it felt like a teenage album. This didn't feel like a teenage album. It didn't feel too overblown. So yeah, it was interesting. I mean, all that said, it's probably not going to be something I'll revisit. But like the songs Float to the Top and Carry, you know, they might make it onto a couple of playlists of mine. I like those two songs a lot. Other than that, it was a bit hit and miss, but yeah, better than I was expecting would be my summary.
All right, that brings Tom. That brings us to Tom.
Tom.
Yeah, Microwave were one of the two artists on this podcast which I hadn't heard of before. One True Pairings, the other one I didn't know who that was.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this album kind of sounded a lot like some of the like run-of-the-mill Kerrang magazine bands, which my brother would have listened to when he was a kid. So it's not like typically it's not really my bag, so to speak. But I did think it started off okay. I thought Leather Daddy and Float to the Top, which you just mentioned, they're quite catchy and well-constructed songs. I just generally it didn't really do it for me. It sounded a lot like other bands in this genre, so I've put that there's a reason that it's been several years since I last listened to a Biffy Clyro album. And, it's kind of that kind of music. So yeah, dissed to Biffy Clyro on this podcast. It didn't do that much for me on repeat listens either, and I agree with the point that I think Nick made about it. It made its point quite early on, and then towards the end it kind of drifted off like unmemorably for me, and it's quite short, under half an hour, so I think that's a bit of a problem when
you can't do 30 minutes. Versus Burna Boy's hour and 5 or whatever.
It might just be because I associate it with the kind of bands which were around when I was a bit younger, but its sound just feels a bit dated, and I think Matt said that it kind of sounds a bit like a few 90s bands.
It does have a 90s sound.
Yeah. So I thought some parts of it were okay, but for me it didn't seem to do anything that was particularly interesting, and I don't think I'll be returning to it in the future.
Okay.
Cool.
All right, that brings us to the last one of the Ordinary albums, which is One True Pairings, One True Pairing.
One True Pairing.
Anyone mind if I start on this one?
Go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I wanted to be really careful in drawing a conclusion on this album because, like, Wild Beasts are one of my favourite bands of the last 10 years. And I didn't want to dismiss this album because it wasn't Wild Beasts, or I didn't want to just like it out of loyalty to Tom and what, you know, the band means to me. Not you, Tom. Tom from Wild Beasts.
He has no loyalty to you whatsoever.
Yeah, no loyalty to you. So it was one that I kind of had to think quite carefully about, and it took me a bit of time, but eventually I did really, really like this album a lot. I think it's unmistakably and perhaps unavoidably Wild Beasts-like at times. And that kind of left me questioning whether it was distinct enough as its own on an album for a bit. But I think it's a bit more brooding and sinister than a lot of Wild Beasts albums as a whole, and I think that sets it apart. I think it's I also think it's a really complete piece of work. I think it flows incredibly well and has a real purpose. Nick, this was the answer for the purpose question that you got asked. Just so you know.
Just I'll do it next time.
So I think the flow and the sort of purpose to the album was something that wasn't always the case with Wild Beasts albums. I think sometimes they had like amazing set pieces and like one-off songs, like you think songs like A Simple Beautiful Truth, but maybe the albums weren't as consistent as this is at times. And it's consistent all the way through. It doesn't really have any dips, but I think it opens really, really strongly. I think the opener, Zero Summer, and the title track, which I think is either track 2 or 3, are some of the best stuff on there. I also love Only God Can Judge Me, which comes towards the end. But I'd say there isn't really a weak point on the album for me. So as a summary, I'm just really pleased to see him move on and come back so quickly and do something that's in keeping with Wild Beasts enough for me to see the linkage, but also it's got his own stamp on it. And I think I've not listened to Hayden White's solo album, which came out just before it. I've heard less positive things about it. Apparently it's taken that sort of Wild Beasts thing that they did with the last album, where it's a lot of stuff just about sex and It's yes. Whereas this, I felt had a real sort of personal sort of quite a dark album in the way he kind of comes across, as if it really sounds like he's had a bit of a struggle, but has come out of it with this album. So yeah, I was really impressed and really pleased as well that he's brought something out that didn't sort of just diminish my feelings towards him as a musician. So
Yeah.
that's where I stand.
Can I jump in there?
Yes.
Because I have listened to Hayden's album.
Okay.
I think the thing with this album is it sounds almost like a logical next step for the direction that Wild Beasts were heading. They were becoming a bit more electronic, a little bit more spare, a little bit darker, I think. Hayden's album felt like a regressive step.
Okay.
Musically, at least, it felt more akin to some of their earlier stuff, and it's just a bit more boring.
Okay.
It was more
Really?
monotone throughout.
Really.
And so, comparatively, this is a much superior album,
Okay.
I think.
Cool.
It was really interesting the way it worked out that they both released albums within a couple months of each other.
Yeah.
I don't know how unintentional or intentional that was, because I also don't know how they broke up.
Yeah, I read
Really?
an interview
Good
with him
terms,
the other day
because-
where it seemed, without him saying, with Tom, without him saying it, it seemed like there was a little bit of animosity there. I don't know for sure,
Yeah.
but it seemed like there was a bit of whether he had wanted the band to end as much as other members did. I don't think he did. That was my sense.
Yeah.
But yeah,
We went to
Well, that
their
would make
second to
sense.
last gig, I think it was, before they disbanded, and they were all
guys.
yeah. Tom went, didn't you? And it was. They seemed to. I mean, obviously you can tell from my performance, but they seemed very upbeat moment. You know, very like joyous celebration of what they'd achieved. So I'm disappointed and sad if they
hopefully
aren't
I'm
getting
wrong.
along.
It was just a
But,
sense I got from the interview, but
Yeah. Well, that's kind of interesting. Maybe they were happy but also sad at the same time when you reflect on it. I don't know. But yeah, like this album is a continuation of his work. I think it makes sense to me. It's obviously different to Wild Beasts. It feels like there's a loss of one dimension because you don't have the kind of battling vocals anymore, and it's not as musically like diverse. But I would actually reframe it as it's almost like more focused
yeah,
than
it's got
the
purpose,
previous
right?
Wild Beast. Pardon?
It's got purpose, right, Nick?
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
It has purpose. I think. It reminds me of when Editors released their third album. After their second album was like stadium rock, and then they came back with their third album, which was very much synth heavy, stripped back. It was all kind of post-punky, new ordery kind of style, and that kind of switch in tone, and so that's what it kind of it really reminded me of. But yeah, I think I enjoyed this album, but I also not sure how much. I still think I preferred Wild Beasts.
Yeah,
At the end of the day.
I mean, Wild Beasts,
Yeah.
exceptional band, aren't they?
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah,
this was better than I
was good.
expected as a solo
yeah.
project.
Especially
from one of them, I think.
after hearing the other album.
And I think he would,
yeah.
if you were to look at the band as well, you would have maybe thought that he would be the one who was less successful on their own. I think just because of Hayden's voice and his sort of his personality, and is the way he is
Yeah.
on stage. I would have thought he would have done the more successful thing, but it sounds like
Yeah.
that's not the case, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, especially with the different trajectories, it would suggest that Tom was more the driving force behind the direction that Wild Beasts were going.
Yeah, interesting.
Do you want to take over, Nick, as you also know
I
them?
think I want to hear Tom
can
first. Yeah, Tom, go for it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of the points that have been made so far, but so much so that my first 2 points I was going to bring up were about Editors.
Oh, wow.
The band.
Nice.
So, with Editors, they were one of those bands which I really liked as a teenager in the 2000s before I discovered Joy Division. And
Yeah.
I think Tom Fleming's voice does sound like the guy out of Editors. And after my first listen, to be honest, I was ready to write this off as a new Editors album that we didn't need. Because I think this has also been mentioned, but one of the main strengths of Wild Beasts was, I think, the interplay between Hayden Thorpe and Tom Fleming. And I wasn't convinced that we needed solo albums from either of them, really. But I do have to say, after listening to this repeatedly, that I do think this is a pretty good record with a lot to like on it. I think it's very listenable. The hooks are good. The tracks are really tightly constructed, and I never found it a chore to listen to this on the playlist. And I think it explores some really interesting lyrical themes. So the song "Weapons" seems to be about kind of toxic masculinity and knife crime. It seemed. It kind of has this build up, and then the last line is like, "Gonna take a weapon and go out tonight." But the rest of the lyrics have been about how he's kind of bullied by his older brother and his friends, kind of thing. So yeah, it does remind me a lot of the music of my teenage years, the kind of post-punk revival which took place in the mid-2000s. So bands like Editors, Interpol, Maximo Park, Block Party, those kind of bands. I think some of those bands were better than others. So some took elements of post-punk and kind of crafted interesting new music with it. So Interpol, for example. And some just kind of rehashed it, like Editors. And I think sometimes this One True Pairing album kind of falls between the two. So I think for all its catchy hooks, sometimes the production is a little bit almost like parodic of post-punk. So at times it directly mimics the production for Unknown Pleasures by Martin Hannett. So Dawn at the Factory, which I think is the kind of centerpiece of this album, it even has that sound of like the steel gates crashing in the background, which is the same effect as Insight on Joy Division's Unknown Pleasures, which is 40 years old this year. So I don't think it's like original in that sense. But I think this is his first album, and like you say, I think that last Wild Beast gig was last year, was it?
Early last year, was it?
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly.
So for them both to come out with solo albums, I mean, I haven't heard Hayden's album either, but for him to come out with an album which is this strong, like straight away as a debut album, I think is really quite impressive. And I think, like, if you're like me, if you're a teenager, I'm not a teenager now, but if you're,
You just look like one, cherubically.
Like me if you're a teenager.
if you're like a 15-year-old and you listen to a One True Pairing album and it allows you to get into post-punk and Joy Division, who are one of my favourite bands of all time, I think this, that's only a good thing. And I think this is a decent first record for Tom, and I think moving forward, I think he'll go from strength to strength, and when he's a bit freer of his influences, he'll go on to make really good work.
Yeah,
so, I was surprised how much I enjoyed this album.
It's interesting thing about the influences and stuff. But you think when someone's been in a band like that for years and had the other people to rely on and stuff, maybe coming away and doing your own thing, you would cling a little bit to things like that, wouldn't you? You would cling to things that make you feel a bit more comfortable, I suppose. But I mean, it's an interesting point.
Yeah.
So shall I jump
That's
in?
cool.
Is that you,
Yeah.
Tom? Yeah. So it's interesting, all this conversation about Hayden and Tom and what Wild Beasts were and stuff. I think again, I'm going to approach it from a fairly musical standpoint, not a conceptual one. Really. So I think it misses the vocal interplay between the two voices that was so nice in the Wild Beast songs. I think that is a pity. I think songwriting it is a decent album. And I think it's interestingly put together. It's actually, to take it quite personally, it's actually quite a scary album to me, because I think the biggest problem I have with it is, even though it has this nice delivery, nice song construction, it sounds very, very in the box. That expression, like from a studio standpoint, it sounds like it's been made as I make music in the computer, not in a proper studio a lot of the time. And I find that quite limiting to the point of distraction, unfortunately, which is, it sounds a bit flat in that respect, that it needs some more breathing room or space to sort of allow for the ideas to expand out into really sort of gain traction with me. So, I mean, again, I'm arguing against what I personally am interested in doing, so which is, I realise, a bit odd, but I suppose
you're going to stop now.
When I listen to something like going back to JPEGMAFIA, he's obviously completely in the box as well, recording everything in the computer, or mostly, I would assume, and for doing so with the notion that he's consciously playing with the limitations of that and breaking the limitations of that. This sounds like an album that wants to be recorded with a really nice set up in a lovely space with some orchestration and stuff like that, but ultimately couldn't have that because I don't know why, maybe budgetary wise or time wise, I've no idea, but it just sounded smaller than it should have been. It sounded like a set of really interesting demos, but not a fully fleshed out album. So yes, I suppose I'd describe it as a little bit of a pity in the end. I didn't really hate it, but I think it had a potential to do a lot more than it ended up doing. So that's me on that one.
Well, you're wrong, but it's all right.
Thank you.
I'm going to see him the week after next.
Really?
If any Manchester folk. Sorry, Matt.
Really?
I know you're the other side.
Whereabouts?
He's playing at Yes, which
Okay.
yeah,
Nice small
I'm going to
venue,
see him the
yeah.
week after next. So it'll be interesting to see what it is as a live thing, I suppose. With you talking about
Yeah.
it, a lot of it being possibly created.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll
the
see.
way-
Will it
If
just
he's
be
got a
him?
laptop
Will he
with
have a
him, if he's got a
band?
laptop and a keyboard, then
Interesting
I
to see
think
how
that'll be interesting. If he's got a string quartet with him, then I'll words basically, yeah. So, but yeah, I think there are.
Cool.
I think
So-
there are ways of doing things though in the box that still sound expansive. At least I fucking hope so, because that's what I try and do. But I don't know. I just don't know if they pulled it off.
I
in
think the
this
sound
case,
that he's got on this album is what he wanted, though. I think that
Okay.
I don't
Yeah.
agree with the sort of the idea that it sounded like it wanted more. I think it's quite a tight album, and it's quite sort of dark and brooding, I think, and quite intense. And I think the sound that he's got there is purposeful, and I think it really works.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna
Well, you're wrong. So there we
scrub
go.
your last. If I was doing the editing of this, I would just edit your last bit out, but you do
Set
it.
it me
so-
out completely. I would guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we'll have to let you stay on because you do the editing.
I do.
But you were wrong.
So,
That's so magnanimous of you.
Yeah, exactly. So Tom is going to tell us. Is going to confirm.
Well, first-
I'll go ahead. Yeah.
First, we're going to say what we thought of the playlist
Oh, okay. Yeah.
As a
fair
whole.
point,
Yeah,
fair
so, I
point.
mean, Matt.
before we get into that.
You didn't want to host this one, Nick, but you keep taking the responsibilities away from
I
Matt.
just feel bad that Matt's not on the ground here and doesn't
Let
know
Matt
what we're
host.
doing. All right, fair enough, Matt. You're in charge. Whatever you say. Whatever you say. What would you like to do now, Matt? What should we talk about?
I would really like to talk about what we thought about this playlist.
Okay.
So if you seem like you really want to talk, Nick, so you can go first.
Okay. I thought this playlist was fairly mixed. It had 2 albums that I thought were really good, a sort of middling one, and a couple of things that didn't really impress me. So it was a pretty middle of the road one for me. It didn't blow me away, but there was some decent stuff. JPEGMAFIA was probably the best thing on it for
Wow.
me, but I didn't
Ooh.
absolutely adore it. But
I mean, it was
thought
definitely
a solid
the worst.
album. Yeah. Okay, so
What do you reckon, Tom?
I enjoyed this playlist. I enjoyed 4 of the 5 records on it. My favourite is probably a tie between JPEGMAFIA and Burna Boy, which
Wow.
one
2 worst ones.
one got a bit of love, one got no love whatsoever. But, agree to disagree.
fair enough.
There's lots of bad choices happening right now.
What about you, Fran?
I thought it was a very average playlist with 2 really good albums in The One True Pairing and Silver Jews. And then, one that I hated. So yeah, an average playlist. It wasn't a bad playlist though, we've had much worse. I thought,
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I think One True Pairing and Silver Jews really lifted it. I thought they were both great.
Yeah,
Matt?
I would agree, but mostly because I don't think there was nothing on here I loved, and there was nothing on here I really hated. It was just, yeah, you guys seem to be more like diverse in your opinions of the album. I'm just like, meh, it's okay.
So it's mediocre.
I
Is what
did-
you're basically saying.
Yeah, I did really like Microwave. I'm like a 90s kid.
Microwave was your favourite.
Maybe, yeah.
Your
I
favourite
don't know.
was JPEGMAFIA,
Yeah.
and yours. What the
Burna Boy and JPEGMAFIA.
what the hell is going on?
So I just listened to you.
We've got a good split.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all being picky.
I don't know that we can carry on with this project.
Yeah, I want to hit the stop recorder right now.
Right, Tom, do you want to tell us about St Vincent before
Yes.
they punch each other?
Nick's looking at me like he really wants me to tell you about St Vincent.
Yeah,
so-
convert me.
Oh, I'm excited.
Okay, so the thing I love about St Vincent's music is the contrast that kind of sits at the heart of her music, and that's the contrast between the expectations that come with her appearance. So, and I think she uses this. So her like pretty face and a pleasant voice, which she uses on her face, just is the front cover of the first 2 albums, and this plays against the darkness that kind of lies beneath the surface. So she plays with these expectations, and I think her music is multi-layered as a result of this. So I found a great description online from a journalist, Lindsay Zolads, who wrote that there's always a quality of menace to Clarke's music, but it usually conjures a feeling of an eerie smile pulled too tight. And I think that is pretty much sums up
I
what
like that.
I love
Mental
about
picture, that's good, yeah.
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 So, St Vincent, Annie, aka Annie Clarke, she said in an interview that she plays off the fact that she's a very demure-looking person, but she certainly has as much aggression or anger as the next person, and that's got to come out somehow. And I think, like, thematically, her music reminds me of someone like a filmmaker like David Lynch. So I don't know if you're all familiar with the film Blue Velvet.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that kind of explores the kind of dark underbelly of like polite society, and I think that kind of light-dark comparison is at the heart of St Vincent's music, and I really like the juxtaposition of those elements. So the first 3 albums particularly explore these themes, and I think they just get better and better. For listeners, I put forward a 10-track playlist, and the first 6 tracks are from the first 3 albums. So the first album, Marry Me, I thought was a decent kind of first stab at this kind of ethos that she has. But it's on the second album where she paired with the producer John Congleton, and I think that combination really kind of got to the heart of why she's so great. He actually produced the new Angel Olsen album, just as an aside, so that kind of sound, that kind of production style is kind of clear across St Vincent and his other work. So I've included the song The Strangers on this playlist, which I think shows a creative leap from the first song, Now Now, which is the opener to the previous album. Because it has these like Disney-like whimsical strings, and they're offset against kind of cutting lyrics like Paint the Black Hole Blacker, which is, the kind of like sinister lyrics, but they play against this like really pretty arrangement. And she actually admitted that Disney soundtracks were an influence on that album, and I think she uses the sort of light atmosphere that they create to really highlight her darker lyrics. I think Strange Mercy, her third album, is her greatest work to date. So whereas on the first 2 albums, the front covers just have a picture of her face, kind of not quite smiling, but kind of just looking a bit off, and you kind of wondering what's going on beneath the surface. The third album has kind of like a mouth trying to escape through like kind of white mask, and it's kind of like a surreal, a bit disturbing image, and I think that's quite a good reflection of the music that's contained within. So the song Surgeon, for example, is largely about depression, and you've got these keys in the background which really conjure up like a sense of like malaise and like stasis, where and she just sings about dressing and undressing for a wall, like not being able to leave the house kind of thing. But then that's offset against the second half of that song, which has this like, I think it's a guitar, I mean I'm not great on the instruments, but it's like, it has this like freak out where it kind of conjures the impression of someone that's reached breaking point, they're kind of like having a breakdown. And I think there's those kind of production elements all across that album. So my favourite song of hers, full stop, is Champagne Year on that, which I included on this playlist. And that's because I think it just says so much with so little. Like it's kind of about how she hasn't really achieved everything she wanted to in life, and she's kind of looking at her lot as she reaches the same age as her. Like the Champagne Year is like the age which is the same date in your birth year or something. So she was 28 when she created that, and I think it seems like there's like a sighing sense of disappointment and like vain hopeful notes in that song, and there's like a minimal lyricism which works on a number of levels. So she says lines like, "I make a living telling people what they want to hear."
Great line.
Yeah, so I think that says like 3 different things just in one line. And I just think the production, Nick, is absolutely perfect on that album. And it's one of my favourite releases.
All the Justin is like staring at me across the mic here is rage.
I just can't wait to hear what you're going to say. Yeah. But I think the production is absolutely perfect on that album. It's one of my favourite releases of this decade, since we're talking about music of the decade. So after these first 3 albums, she did a collaborative one with David Byrne. And her sound noticeably changed after that. It started to incorporate more art rock and pop elements. So on her self-titled album, which is the last one she did with John Congleton, there's a song like Digital Witness, which kind of satirises contemporary society. And then there's a song called Prince Johnny, which kind of shows the expansion of her musical palette. It's got like choirs in it, and it's a really enhanced sound. And then she released Mass Seduction, her most recent record, which is it's got more synthy and pop elements. And this wasn't my favourite. I don't think it really worked as well, that album. There's the odd song which I did like Pills, which I included on the playlist, and that's got production credit from Soundwave, who produces for Kendrick Lamar. So it's a really different direction for her. But even though I didn't really like that record that much, it kind of encapsulates what I love about her and the art, my favourite artists, and that's the willingness to push their art in new directions. Like when they've mastered something, they're moving to trying to do something else. And she released an acoustic album alongside, a year after Mass Seduction, called Mass Education, which I've included the reworking of the song Slow Disco on the playlist. And I think it's like a piano album with the same songs from Mass Seduction on it. And I think what that did was it showed how her music works on two levels. So on Mass Seduction, the songs are quite extroverted, they're quite synthy, pop songs, but on Mass Education, they're more kind of melancholy, and they just show that there's different way to play those songs and different meaning to those songs. So basically, I think those last two, my least favourite of her records, kind of sum up what I love about her, and that's that she's a multi-dimensional artist whose songs work on multiple different levels, essentially. And that's my opinion of her, but I know other opinions are out there.
So let's hear from Matt, shall we?
Do you want to go to people who aren't going to be dicks, or do you want to go to Nick?
Do you want to get out of the way?
Should we just go to Nick? Should we get out of the way?
All right, fair enough. So there's been an unspoken rule. We don't have many rules. Franchise to impose a lot of rules. We don't tend to stick to them. One of the unspoken rules has been that when we do the Wire Love, the other people are respectful of the fact that somebody on the group actually loves the artist, So I've been really challenged this month on that basis. And I think, but I will say that I think Tom knew going into this selection that I had a serious problem with St Vincent.
What?
So, yeah, you did. So I think in that sense, all bets are off really for like how I can handle it. I feel like I'm open to say what I want about it. I will disregard as well the review that I wrote on pickybees.com about her production credit on the new Slater Keeney album, which was not very favourable. I'll put it that way. wasn't keen. So I think I'll give three examples of my problems I have with St Vincent. And I think in a way, to her credit, in some cases there are problems of potential versus just not having any ability. I feel like there's potential there, and she delivers it in ways that I find extremely irritating and don't work for me. So in no particular order, I'll go with Pills, because you mentioned Pills at one point.
Yeah.
First of all, and I'll see what Fran has to say about this later, but I can remember when we did Father John Misty a long time ago now, Fran telling me how preachy he found Father John Misty to be, and I find that song to be just unbearably dictatorially preachy about the mass culture's dependence and need for medication and things that they find sort of anaesthetize them from the challenges of the world and stuff. So I find it immediately a bit irritating in that respect. But I will say that this is what I mean about the potential, that the song is in two parts. It has a long outro section of almost half the length of the song, which is actually, it's really quite beautiful way of building the song out at the end. To get to that point, you have to listen to an unbelievably grating endurance test of jingles all the way through it. Pills, 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 pills. It's so irritating. It's like a jingle from like a birthday card. You open the birthday card, it plays that little tune at you. It's like one of those, like a Christmas card or something, you know? Unbelievably irritating, and such a tragedy to build towards a song that has that lovely, lush outro and then not but sort of mask it in this issue. How about slow disco? Let's talk about slow disco. I thought it was a very clever move of Tom to select the piano version of this song rather than the full production one from the previous album, because the piano version of this song is really, really beautiful again. It really is pretty stunning. I mean, performance is brilliant, but also I thought it was really excellently written and lyrically great. When you turn back from that to the album version, it is almost unbearable and hard to get through.
That's
listening
cheating.
to.
Yeah, you're cheating.
That's
side of the playlist.
that you can't just cherry pick versions, obscure non-album made albums.
Released an album.
I know, but it's not. It's a re-release of the original version of the album. So anyway, I think that's cheating.
It's a different version of the song. The whole thing is different.
Yeah.
Well, this version of the song's good. The other version, which I couldn't quite, any reason I don't know why I think that would be a big deal, is awful. So that's a big problem. Digital Witness, you mentioned that as well. That's my third example. It is really, really grating again. Like really.
I think you're right to go for the dick first.
It's so irritating. It has a complicated and interesting message, but it is dressed in some really, really dodgy synths, like pop synths. Like little tooting horns and stuff that sound again like little jangly, just irritatingly jangly stuff. I think she's got things to say. She's got great vocal ability. She's a good lyricist, and she dresses the songs in ways that are really off-putting to that. Really off-putting to that. So it's a tragedy, honestly. But yeah, not my favourite Why I Love we've ever done.
Is it?
Surprise.
Is it your least favourite?
It's my least favourite by an absolute mile.
Is your issue like predominantly with her latest stuff, or does that?
Yeah, I think it is.
It's interesting that the one you chose were all towards the end.
Yeah, it is the latest stuff. I agree with that. Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
Although
Which
there was no part of it that I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Except I would go back to the piano version of Slow Disco. I thought that was and the outro for Pills. If I could work out exactly how to skip through the first 3 minutes in one button, so rather than scanning around listening to her screeching pills at me.
I mean, I would say that Pills, I think the jingle bit and the kind of message of it is like it's about herself, isn't it? Like it's maybe like satirical. But,
Yeah.
Okay.
Nick doesn't
But
get stuff,
you're
so-
entitled to your opinion, Nick.
Thank you.
It's
Thanks very
wrong.
kindly. I don't think Fran agrees with you, but still,
Yeah.
I'm not entitled to my opinion.
You're totally entitled to be wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Who
Do you want to
go
correct
next?
him, Fran?
Who's going? Yeah,
Go on,
Fran's
Fran.
going.
Correct him.
Well, for me, it's just been really enjoyable to spend the month with the playlist. I'm already a big fan, particularly of the album Strange Mercy. You picked out a lot of the songs on the playlist that I would have picked out, other than the title track from that album, which is obviously her best song ever. So why you didn't include her best song on the playlist is a bit of a weird one. But you know, I'll let you off. I just think she's one of the most creative, interesting musicians out there at the minute. I think what you said about her changing up her style regularly. Again, yes, I agree. Mass Seduction is her weakest album. I haven't listened to the piano version, but I think I will after hearing the version of Slow Disco. But Mass Seduction, I still liked it, but it was not as interesting to me because of the pop stylings. But then I think I know what she was trying to do with that, and I really like the character she created around that album and the stage shows she put on, and I thought it was very clever. And this is a big thing for me to say, but she kind of reminds me of Bowie in some ways, in the sort of the way she changes things up, the way she creates a character with each album, the way she sort of uses her persona and, like you said, her image as a sort of counteract to what she's doing, and she very much plays on that, and I think that's a really, really powerful part of her sort of whole vibe, really. She's very innovative. Each album's something new. For me, my favourite songs on this list were The Strangers, Surgeon and Slow Disco. And I love that you put Pills on there because I know how much Nick hates it. So I'm glad that Pills is on there.
Unbelievable.
But I do think Pills is probably her worst song.
Thank you. Thank you.
I do find it a bit irritating. But I'm really glad it was on the playlist because I know Nick had to listen to it all month, and that's great. I think there's definitely there's other songs I would have gone for from that album, and I like the original version of Slow Disco.
So do I, actually.
I'm trying to think what my favourite one is. There's a slow one on that album that I love, and I can't remember the name of it. It's gone out of my head.
Smoking Section, maybe?
No, it's not Smoking Section.
Oh,
It's gone out of my head,
York,
but
New York.
yeah, New York, yeah. And I think she's fantastic, and I enjoyed spending this time. I would have been happy for you to have added another 10 songs to the playlist.
Yeah. I wanted to keep it short out of respect for Nick. No, I just wanted to.
But no, yeah,
You should have doubled down.
I think she's fantastic, and I struggle to understand Nick's.
I've just spent 15 minutes explaining it to you.
I don't
You weren't
understand
listening,
anything
obviously.
you said.
Okay.
I just don't. I see your point about pills, but you did this when we did the mass seduction on the podcast. You just talked about pills for 5 minutes.
I gave you 3 songs out of 10.
But one of them you loved.
I hate the version of it that was on the actual main album release.
And what about the song from Strange Mercy? What about Surgeon? What about...
Do you like Surgeon?
Yeah.
Not really, no.
What about Champagne Year?
I just found it jingly.
We're going to go through every song.
Jingly.
I'm not going to go through it all again.
We can say jingly about mass seduction and I can go with that.
I gave you 3 examples already. So
one of which you
that's
loved.
enough.
One of which you loved. But yeah. Matt?
Nick's wrong.
Yes.
She's amazing. She is an absolute trailblazer, I think.
I actually laughed then when you snorted into the mic.
I think like she has contributed to this atmosphere of like at the moment women are I think dominating anything that is adjacent to pop, and her kind of alt pop stylings and kind of indie pop really I think she's helped lay the groundwork for this because she is doing stuff that's super inventive and creative and interesting, and she isn't held back by labels or held back by ascribing to a specific notion of what she should be. She just does what she wants to do, and I don't her self-titled album I think is my favorite album, which is I don't know her 4th album.
Of all albums or just of her?
Of her,
Okay, right.
but it would be in my conversation for
completely
like
lost
album
it.
of the decade.
Okay.
It would be.
Partially lost it then.
I made a playlist and it was on there, so she's just phenomenal. We've talked about Surgeon, but I think it was like really interesting that she chose specifically for the sample something from James Bond, like notorious misogynist. And then creates this weird discussion between oppression and submission, and to have that as the background is just I think it's really smart and clever, and she's thinking on many levels, and yeah, I'm glad that she's around.
Yes.
I really see your comparison to David Bowie, and I agree as well. I think that it's strong, but it's also warranted.
Yeah, I think there's not many people I would say that about.
No.
Because there's not many people who do change up so successfully, and I think it is an important thing. It's so a lot of the best bands and best artists do it, and also I love the persona. I love an artist who sort of makes them more than the music by creating a persona, and that's something she does really well, I think.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it was definitely a highlight.
Thank Christ for that.
Yeah, you can move on.
I thought you were going to get won over by it.
Yeah.
You never. Well,
No,
next time. Next St Vincent
album.
album.
Get one over by it. It wasn't going to happen.
All right.
But
Right. So next time we're going to be talking about our albums of the decade, which we've kind of hinted at already. We have how many albums do we have, Fran?
15 people have chosen their album of the decade. 2 of them, these 2 who have just completely disagreed about St Vincent, chose the same album. So there's 14 albums in total.
So everyone has lots of homework to do before the next podcast. Lots of listening. But you can find everything on the website. You can find the playlist on pickybees.com. There's also the Twitter and the Facebook, which Fran knows.
At Picky Bastards, capital B, capital B, on Twitter, and at The Picky Bastards on Facebook. Again, we are not the Bluegrass Band.
Yeah. And so thanks for joining us, Tom.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah,
thanks for coming in, mate.
Having you again.
Yeah, you had to do it twice. You're stuck with us for too many hours now.
And both times, like last time, the time that didn't make through, you did Frank Ocean, and I gave it some heat. So you've not really had the nicest time from us.
He's had a tough time. He deserves a beer now. I'll give him a beer.
Yeah,
But you know,
you've earned it.
But then you do like the JPEGMAFIA album, so you're also all wrong.
Well, yeah, you know, picky for a reason, you know.
Yeah. Cool.
All right.
Cool. Well, until next time.
See you next time.
Thanks very much.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye bye.